This year, you're going to introduce the pilot scheme for vaccination, and the injection team from Department of Health is going to be the frontline operators of this scheme. I have asked 7 school principals, and they are really full of praises for this pilot scheme, and they say that the process has been very smooth. And to take a 600-student primary school, for an example, there were 4 lines for vaccination, and it took them only 2 hours to complete vaccination. And parents were very confident that the scheme was very effective, and that's why the participation rate was very, very high. And so that seems to be a very effective way of introducing vaccination. Unfortunately, the pilot scheme is not expanded so far. And so how can we increase Hong Kong's vaccination rate to a level high enough to combat any surge of influenza? I think that is an outstanding issue that we need to address. And also every year, the government puts together the children inoculation program involving vaccination against other diseases such as polio and also measles and so on and so forth. And the target group is territory-wide primary school students. And the Department of Health injection team is responsible for doing this. And while we were discussing the budget, I asked the Bureau about this. Injection team each year for inoculation program is going to cost around $18 million. Now, since we already have a proven effective injection and inoculation program, why can't we include influenza vaccination into the already proven effective inoculation program? Because I can see that there are similarities between the two, and so is it possible for you to include influenza into your ongoing inoculation program so that vaccination rate against influenza in Hong Kong can be raised to a level as high as Macau, such as 70%? Thank you, Mr. Yip, for your question. And earlier on, it was mentioned that our pilot scheme was praised by certain schools. And Mr. Yip mentioned the children inoculation program against other diseases. Now, those diseases are a little bit different than influenza, because influenza vaccination is an annual thing. Now, whereas for inoculation against other diseases, they were being only carried out at a certain level in primary school or against a certain age group. And so it's more a one-off thing. And so it's different than influenza. And also number of students involved and number of classes involved will be different, because we are now trying to encourage primary 1 to primary 6 students to all be vaccinated against influenza. And so in terms of logistics and in terms of operational arrangements, the two programs are very, very different, and influenza vaccination is much more challenging. And this year we have introduced the pilot scheme for influenza vaccination, and we already put together an outreach arm in order to administer that. We hope that through the introduction of various channels for vaccination, we can make primary school sector protected more and more against influenza, and we hope that the vaccination rate can be raised progressively. As for what is the best way to actually go about it, whether it should be government and private sector cooperation, or whether it should be a subsidy approach, or whether it should be a government go-it-alone approach, we are still trying to try various options out, and we're going to take stock of what's happening this year before we decide a way forward. Mr. Yip, it seems that the two programs actually are similar in nature and also in skills as well as technology involved. And so the main difference is the number of participants, because we need to do the influenza vaccination program before winter surge. And so the window is very, very small, within 2 months. And also the number of students involved is much larger, and that's why it's much more challenging. And so it's about time constraint and also resources constraint.